Beneath the rolling fields and quiet towns of Indiana lie secrets carved in earth and stone, echoes of civilizations whose stories were never fully told. Here, in the heartland of America, ancient mounds rise like silent monuments to forgotten worlds. Strange carvings weather on lonely rocks, and whispers of giants buried in sacred earth refuse to fade from memory. For centuries, archaeologists, explorers, and storytellers have tried to piece together these mysteries. Who built the vast earthworks that align with the stars? What messages linger in the fading petroglyphs of Vincennes? And why do so many legends speak of a lost people whose presence cannot be explained by history alone? These are not just relics of the past, they are questions that reach across time, challenging the way we understand human origins and the unseen forces that shaped this land. Tonight, we journey into the heart of Indiana's unsolved ancient mysteries. So sit back, open your imagination, and let's dive deep into the enigmas science still cannot explain. On the banks of the Wabash River, near the historic town of Vincennes, Indiana, rests a curious stone, its surface weathered by centuries of rain, wind, and shifting earth. At first glance, it looks like any other outcrop along the river's edge. Its gray-brown face blends into the landscape, a quiet and unassuming feature in a region shaped by waterways and fertile plains. But on closer inspection, faint carvings emerge. Lines, shapes, and symbols etched into the rock long before European settlers ever set foot on this land. These are the Vincennes petroglyphs, Indiana's fading rock writings. To the casual observer, the markings might seem random, the result of natural erosion or idle scratches made by passing hands. Yet for those who have studied them, these carvings hint at something far more enigmatic. Scholars, local historians, and indigenous communities alike have wondered, who made them, when, and for what purpose? Unlike the monumental mounds and earthworks that still stand across Indiana, the petroglyphs are small, fragile, and easily overlooked. But within their fragile lines lies one of the state's most enduring archaeological mysteries. The known history is limited. Petroglyphs, literally rock carvings, are found around the world, often serving as windows into ancient belief systems, storytelling traditions, or even astronomical knowledge. In the Midwest, such carvings are rare compared to other forms of indigenous expression like mound building or pottery. Yet here, on this lone Indiana stone, we see evidence that someone felt compelled to leave a mark. Messages carved not in clay or wood, but into stone itself, intended perhaps to endure across generations. Descriptions of the Vincennes petroglyphs date back to the 19th century. Early settlers reported curious symbols carved into the rock, some resembling human figures, others geometric designs, and still others that defied easy classification. As with many such finds, the very act of documentation altered their fate. Curious visitors chipped away fragments, water levels shifted, and industrial development encroached. What remains today is a fragmentary record, faint and fading, threatened by the simple passage of time. Mainstream archaeology offers cautious explanations. These carvings could have been made by indigenous peoples of the woodland period, perhaps the same cultural groups associated with the nearby earthworks and burial mounds. The motifs may represent ritual symbols, clan markers, or simple artistic expressions. In this view, the Vincennes petroglyphs are an extension of a broader Native American tradition, one more piece in the mosaic of indigenous history in Indiana. But the carvings raise more questions than they answer. Some lines seem deliberate yet oddly abstract, their meaning elusive. Were they maps, celestial diagrams, storytelling devices? Others note that certain figures bear resemblance to motifs found far beyond Indiana, suggesting long-distance cultural exchanges or convergent traditions that remain poorly understood. If so, what networks of travel and communication might have existed here, centuries before Europeans charted the rivers? Local legends add another layer of intrigue. Some claim the markings tell of a lost people, perhaps an ancient tribe that vanished long before recorded history. Others suggest they might be connected to mythological beings, a physical record of stories once told around fires under Indiana's night sky. A few have speculated, without proof, that the petroglyphs might even predate indigenous settlement, remnants of an unknown culture altogether. Fringe theories, while unverified, have become part of the narrative surrounding the Vincennes petroglyphs. Some writers propose connections to Old World travelers, Celts, Phoenicians, or other seafarers, imagining that the carvings are evidence of transoceanic contact. Others point to supposed similarities with the so-called Newark Holy Stones of Ohio or the mysterious Dighton Rock in Massachusetts, arguing that such out-of-place artifacts suggest hidden chapters of history. Archaeologists generally reject these ideas as speculation, preferring explanations rooted in indigenous tradition. Yet the persistence of these theories reflects the human urge to find meaning in mystery. The fading state of the carvings complicates all inquiry. Natural erosion, industrial development along the Wabash, and even deliberate vandalism have worn away much of the detail. What once might have been clear symbols are now ambiguous grooves, open to interpretation. Scholars must rely on old sketches, photographs, and descriptions, records made at a time when accuracy was often sacrificed for imagination. Can we truly trust these early depictions? Or were they themselves filtered through the biases and misunderstandings of their recorders? The Vincennes petroglyphs also raise a broader question about memory and preservation. Indiana is dotted with ancient sites, mounds, villages, ceremonial centers. Yet many have been plowed under by agriculture, eroded by rivers, or paved over by modern development. Each loss makes the surviving fragments all the more precious. The carvings at Vincennes remind us how fragile the physical traces of the past can be, and how quickly they can slip into oblivion. Standing before the stone today, one might feel a quiet weight. The river flows past, as it has for millennia. The fields stretch outward, holding the bones of forgotten villages beneath their soil. And on the stone itself, those faint lines endure, marks left by hands that lived and died hundreds, perhaps thousands of years ago. What were they trying to say? Was it a prayer? A warning? A memory? Did they carve these figures in solitude, or as part of a communal ritual meant to tie their people to the land? No definitive answers remain. The Vincennes petroglyphs continue to fade, their meanings slipping further into shadow with each passing year. Yet their very ambiguity is what keeps them alive in the imagination. They force us to confront the limits of our knowledge, to acknowledge that not every story has been written down, and not every mystery has been solved. Perhaps that is their purpose, to remind us that history is not a neat timeline, but a landscape of questions, some of which may never be answered. And so, as the Wabash River flows past, the stone waits, etched with whispers of a past we may never fully understand. As we move eastward across Indiana's rolling plains and river valleys, the landscape begins to tell a story in its contours, an ancient, almost imperceptible narrative etched into the earth itself. Here, among the low hills and the silent expanses of woodland, rise the state's enigmatic mounds. Broad, carefully shaped earthworks, they seem simple at first glance, mere accumulations of soil and clay, smoothed over centuries by wind and rain. Yet when one stands at their edges, looking down into the depressions that once served as ceremonial or burial sites, the scale and ambition of these constructions become clear. These mounds were not built lightly. They demanded organization, labor, and knowledge that continues to challenge our understanding of prehistoric Indiana. It is within these very mounds that whispers of extraordinary claims begin to surface. Tales of figures far taller than any known human, skeletons of impossible size, buried with artifacts that hint at lives larger than history allows. Mainstream archaeology recognizes the mounds as products of the Adena and Mississippian cultures, their construction reflecting social hierarchies, ceremonial practices, and complex relationships with the surrounding environment. Skeletal remains found in these sites generally fit within expected human ranges, yet scattered historical accounts, some recorded in 19th century newspapers, others mentioned in antiquarian reports, speak of giant skeletons, their proportions exceeding normal human scale. One such account describes a mound near the Ohio River, where laborers allegedly uncovered skeletal remains estimated at over 8 feet in length, accompanied by massive tools, stone implements, and ornate ornaments. While contemporary archaeologists often view these reports with skepticism, citing mismeasurement, exaggeration, or fabrication, the persistence of such stories across multiple mounds invites a deeper inquiry. Why would so many accounts of unusually large burials exist in the historical record? Were they merely the product of imagination, or did they capture something that conventional excavation overlooked? Physical evidence from verified mounds does suggest variation. Some burial pits, while modest in size, contain bones of individuals taller than average for the period. Skull shapes, rib cages, and limb proportions occasionally provoke discussion among anthropologists, prompting questions about diet, genetics, or environmental factors that may have contributed to exceptional stature. Yet even with these verifiable anomalies, the giant narrative extends beyond the scientific data into a space where imagination, folklore, and the human fascination with the extraordinary intersect. Local legends add layers of intrigue. Oral histories among indigenous communities sometimes reference ancestors of remarkable size, beings whose presence shaped the land and the rituals performed upon it. Some mounds are said to mark not only burial grounds, but also sites of reverence, where these exceptional individuals, real or symbolic, were commemorated. Could these stories have been grounded in actual encounters with unusually tall members of the population, their memory magnified through generations? Or are they metaphoric, meant to convey the influence, wisdom, or spiritual power of certain people? Speculative theories, while not supported by mainstream archaeology, also persist. Some writers have connected these alleged giants to myths from other parts of the world, suggesting a forgotten chapter of human history where taller beings existed alongside their shorter counterparts. Others propose that environmental factors or unknown genetic lineages might explain sporadic occurrences of extraordinary height in prehistoric populations. Even if unproven, these ideas reveal the human desire to fill gaps in knowledge with imagination, acknowledging that the earth beneath Indiana still holds secrets, and that our understanding of the past may be incomplete. Walking along the mound crests today, one can almost sense the weight of centuries pressing down. The soil bears the fingerprints of countless laborers, the traces of ceremonies conducted in fading light, and the quietude of those interred long ago. Between the soil layers, between the undisturbed sections of these mounds, there may still lie bones or artifacts that could illuminate these extraordinary claims, or cast them further into shadow. Each mound, each depression, is a puzzle piece in a landscape that refuses to yield all its answers. What strikes the modern observer is the combination of meticulous construction and elusive evidence. The mounds are tangible, physical markers of human ingenuity, yet the stories of giants inhabit a space between fact and legend. Are these accounts merely exaggerations of unusually tall individuals, or do they hint at a chapter of prehistory largely erased from the archaeological record? Could soil disturbance, selective excavation, or lost documentation have concealed truths that now seem fantastical? Archaeological investigation has progressed in Indiana over the past century, but these mounds remain enigmatic. Excavations have revealed ceremonial objects, pottery, stone tools, and human remains that provide a glimpse into the lives of Adena and Mississippian peoples. Yet for every artifact cataloged and every burial analyzed, there remains the unanswered question: did these mounds hold individuals, or perhaps stories, beyond the scale we typically recognize? The allure of the mounds lies not in certainty, but in possibility. Standing upon one at dawn or dusk, the land stretching out into muted fields and river valleys, it is easy to imagine the effort, the care, and the reverence invested in their creation. And it is equally easy to imagine that, hidden within their depths, truths linger that science has yet to fully uncover. Perhaps the giants were never meant to be literal, but symbols of achievement, power, or spirituality. Perhaps they were real, their remains lost to time or misclassified by early records. As we continue our exploration, these questions hang in the air, uncomfortably open-ended, inviting contemplation rather than resolution. The mounds are not silent. They speak in a language of soil and shadow, in the curves of their terraces, and in the spaces between the known and the unknown. They remind us that even in regions we think we understand, history can be vast, mysterious, and unfinished. And so, as the sun sets over the Ohio River and the Indiana plains stretch beyond, the mounds hold their secrets still. What was truly buried within them, and what has simply been lost to legend? The answer, if it exists, remains waiting, hidden in earth, in memory, and in the imagination of those willing to wonder. Beyond the quiet fields and rolling hills of eastern Indiana, in the area historically known as Newark, Ohio, lies a site whose discovery would challenge conventional understanding and ignite debates that persist to this day. Though geographically modest, the mounds and burial sites of this region have long been associated with the Adena and Hopewell cultures, whose sophisticated earthworks testify to intricate social organization and ceremonial practice. Yet among these familiar archaeological features, a discovery emerged in the 19th century that set this site apart. A set of small, carved stones, inscribed with symbols and text that seemed utterly out of place. What would come to be known as the Newark Holy Stones. The stones themselves are deceptively simple. One is a flat, rectangular slab of slate, smooth and worn, yet etched with markings that bear a striking resemblance to Hebrew characters. Another is a small, cylindrical artifact, similarly inscribed. At first glance, they might be dismissed as curiosities or crude reproductions, but their provenance is carefully recorded, unearthed during documented mound excavations, alongside human remains and other grave goods typical of the Hopewell culture. The juxtaposition is jarring. An artifact with apparent Old World script appearing within a prehistoric North American context, thousands of years before European contact. Mainstream archaeologists approach the holy stones cautiously. The dominant consensus situates them firmly within 19th century America, a period rife with antiquarian enthusiasm, religious fervor, and a fascination with linking the New World to biblical narratives. Many scholars consider the stones likely forgeries, created to fit a narrative of ancient Hebrews or other Old World peoples arriving on the continent long before documented history. The craftsmanship, style, and context of their discovery invite skepticism, particularly given that the stones were found by David Wyrick, a local surveyor and amateur archaeologist whose motivations have been scrutinized repeatedly. Yet the mystery refuses to be fully explained away. Contemporary analysis of the inscriptions demonstrates a knowledge of Hebrew letter forms not commonly understood by laypersons of the time. The stones were reportedly buried within carefully constructed mounds, often near skeletal remains and other ceremonial artifacts. Could such placement have been accidental or contrived, or does it suggest a deliberate connection, an intention to preserve or convey meaning across cultures, across continents? If so, what knowledge might have existed in pre-Columbian America, and how could such cross-cultural echoes have been transmitted? The questions deepen when considering the context of the Hopewell culture itself. The Adena and Hopewell people were known for elaborate mound building, intricate artwork, and expansive trade networks extending across the Ohio River Valley. Copper, mica, shells, and exotic stones were transported hundreds of miles, suggesting both mobility and contact across regions. Could the holy stones represent an extraordinary outlier in a civilization already adept at symbolic communication? Were they an experimental fusion of ritual and narrative, perhaps inspired by knowledge of distant peoples, or something entirely different? Local legends and 19th century accounts add an additional layer of intrigue. Weyrich himself described the discovery with a reverence that bordered on the spiritual, emphasizing that the stones seemed to carry messages meant to be preserved through time. Some historians speculate that if the stones were indeed deliberate insertions, they may have served as talismans, memorial markers, or coded records of migration, conquest, or spiritual revelation. Others suggest that the artifacts were crafted with the intent to mystify, to weave the mounds into a broader narrative that connected the New World to biblical or ancient histories. Speculative theories, while controversial, have persisted for decades. Some enthusiasts posit that the stones reflect pre-Columbian contact with Hebrew or other Semitic cultures. Others argue that they could indicate a syncretic belief system within the indigenous peoples themselves, integrating symbolic knowledge that paralleled Old World scripts. Mainstream scholarship resists such conclusions, noting the lack of corroborating archaeological evidence for transoceanic travel in this era. Still, the very survival of the stones, carefully inscribed and interred within mounds, invites curiosity and imagination, leaving the story suspended between the possible and the improbable. Physical evidence remains frustratingly elusive. The stones have been studied extensively, but their context, provenance, and authenticity continue to provoke debate. Some scholars argue that too many details of the original excavation were recorded secondhand, leaving open the possibility of misinterpretation or embellishment. Others point to the consistency of Weyrich's notes and the precision of the inscriptions as indicators that the artifacts were real and intentionally placed. As the mounds themselves erode and agricultural development continues, the fragile traces of this discovery become ever more precious, a testament to both human creativity and human mystery. Standing today near the area where the stones were found, one can almost sense the weight of centuries pressing down. The soil has shifted, the trees have grown, and the river winds silently through the valley, yet the memory of the inscriptions lingers. Were they messages meant to communicate something profound, encoded in symbols that survived millennia? Were they the product of imagination, religious fervor, or cultural homage? Or do they represent a fragment of history we have yet to fully grasp? The Newark holy stones, with their blend of verifiable context and enigmatic inscriptions, occupy a space between certainty and speculation. They are a reminder that even within well-studied archaeological sites, anomalies can arise that challenge our assumptions. They prompt us to question the boundaries of knowledge and to consider the many ways human societies have sought to communicate, memorialize, and connect across time. As we look out over the Ohio Valley, imagining the hands that crafted these stones and the lives of the people who built the mounds around them, one is left with a profound sense of uncertainty. The story is incomplete, the evidence tantalizing, and the questions lingering. What secrets remain buried within the mounds? What knowledge has been lost, or perhaps deliberately hidden? The Newark holy stones endure as silent witnesses, whispering of a past that refuses to be fully explained, inviting us to wonder and to keep searching. Beyond the Ohio Valley, moving northward into the lowlands carved by the Kankakee River, the landscape shifts. Long stretches of wetlands, meandering channels, and fertile floodplains stretch beneath a vast, open sky. It is here, amid reeds and shallow waters, that remnants of a forgotten culture quietly endure: the Kankakee Mounds and village sites. At first glance, they may appear as nothing more than subtle rises in the marshy terrain, low humps of earth barely distinguishable from the surrounding soil. Yet, these mounds, carefully constructed and deliberately placed, speak to an ancient people whose presence and practices remain only partially understood. Archaeologists have identified these mounds as part of a complex network of villages, ceremonial spaces, and burial sites that once thrived along the Kankakee River. The mounds themselves vary in size, from modest, single-family burial hills to larger, communal constructions that suggest coordination, planning, and social hierarchy. Clay and earth were transported from miles away, shaped into platforms and terraces, then left to weather the centuries. Their alignment hints at an awareness of the landscape, the river's flow, and perhaps even celestial patterns, a sophistication that underscores the ingenuity of their builders. Excavations over the last century have uncovered tools, pottery fragments, and evidence of dwellings, hinting at a thriving community engaged in agriculture, hunting, and trade. Yet these artifacts raise questions as much as they provide answers. Why were certain mounds positioned on slight rises overlooking the floodplain? What significance did their placement have, and how did the river shape both daily life and ceremonial practices? The precision of their construction seems at odds with the limited technology that would have been available to the builders, prompting reflection on both ingenuity and intent. Local oral histories and early settler accounts add a further layer of mystery. Some narratives suggest that these mounds were the work of a lost river culture, a people whose traditions vanished long before written records could capture them. Were these communities wiped out by disease, environmental change, or conflict? Or did they assimilate quietly into neighboring populations, leaving only subtle traces in the landscape? The answer remains elusive. Intriguingly, some of the Kankakee mounds display patterns and arrangements that defy easy explanation. Certain burial pits contain unusually large skeletal remains, sparking debates reminiscent of those surrounding the alleged giants in other Indiana mounds. While mainstream archaeology attributes these anomalies to natural variation in human stature, some observers have speculated that these findings may point to something more extraordinary: a population whose physical characteristics or social practices diverged from what we typically recognize. Could the river culture have included members whose lives, roles, or even legends inspired stories of exceptional size or power? Beyond the human remains, the artifacts themselves hint at cultural connections both near and far. Stone tools fashioned with precision, pottery adorned with unique motifs, and ornamental objects crafted from exotic materials suggest trade networks extending far beyond the Kankakee floodplain. Could these exchanges have brought not just goods, but ideas, beliefs, or symbolic systems? And if so, what knowledge might have arrived here centuries before the arrival of European settlers? Speculative theories, while not endorsed by the archaeological mainstream, have long been associated with these sites. Some suggest that the mounds were aligned with celestial bodies, perhaps serving as observational platforms or markers for ritual events. Others propose that the villages may have been linked by shared ceremonial practices, creating an intricate social and spiritual network along the river. Even if definitive proof remains absent, such possibilities underscore the depth of planning and cultural sophistication that characterized these communities. Standing today among the mounds, one can almost feel the rhythm of life that once pulsed here. The river winds silently through the marshes. The tall grasses sway in a wind that has shifted little over centuries, and the mounds rise subtly yet persistently from the ground. It is easy to imagine the bustle of a village. Children playing near the water's edge, the sounds of tools shaping wood and stone, ceremonial processions marking the passage of the seasons. And beneath it all, in the carefully constructed mounds, lie the echoes of people whose lives, beliefs, and practices remain only partially understood. These mounds, much like the Vincennes Petroglyphs and the Newark holy stones before them, remind us that Indiana's history is far richer and more complex than the surface suggests. They challenge us to reconsider our assumptions about pre-Columbian North America, to acknowledge the ingenuity and adaptability of its peoples, and to confront the limits of what we think we know. What messages might have been encoded in the river's course, the mound's orientation, or the artifacts interred within? How much of this culture's knowledge, wisdom, and memory has been lost to time, and how much might yet be uncovered beneath layers of soil and sediment? The Kankakee Mounds do not speak in words we can easily understand. They are quiet, enigmatic, and enduring. Yet, in their presence, we are compelled to listen, to wonder, and to imagine the lives and stories of a people who left no written records, but who inscribed themselves upon the land in ways both subtle and profound. The river flows onward, oblivious to centuries of human activity, and the mounds remain, silent witnesses to a culture that once flourished and then disappeared into history's shadow. As we move along this journey through Indiana's unsolved ancient mysteries, these riverine landscapes invite reflection on what has been preserved and what has vanished. What secrets still lie hidden beneath the earth, waiting for careful hands and open minds to uncover? And what might these silent, enduring mounds tell us about a culture lost to time, yet echoing faintly in the present? If only we choose to pay attention. As the river valleys and floodplains of Indiana give way to rolling farmland and dense patches of woodland, the landscape begins to reveal subtle yet deliberate marks of human ingenuity. Here, on a quiet stretch of elevated ground near the town of Anderson, rise a series of earthen formations, circular and precise, their shapes still discernible despite centuries of erosion and cultivation. These are the Anderson Mounds, silent witnesses to a culture long vanished, standing like quiet sentinels over the land they once occupied. At first glance, the mounds might seem modest, their heights gentle, their diameters unassuming. But their arrangement, perfect circles, sometimes in clusters, occasionally aligned with one another, suggests intentionality and knowledge far beyond mere accidental topography. Walking along their edges, one notices subtle rises and depressions, remnants of human planning that hints at a society attuned not just to survival, but to ritual, symbolism, and perhaps even the cosmos itself. Archaeological surveys place these mounds within the Hopewell tradition, a culture renowned for its geometric earthworks and ceremonial sophistication. Excavations have revealed post holes, burial pits, and scattered artifacts, pottery fragments, stone tools, and occasional ornamental items that indicate both artistry and social complexity. Each mound seems to hold a story, yet the full narrative remains frustratingly just out of reach. Why were these circles built? Were they ceremonial, funerary, or both? And how did their builders conceive of the space, the land, and the sky in tandem? One of the most striking aspects of the Anderson Mounds is their alignment. Observers have noted patterns that hint at possible astronomical awareness. Certain mounds appear oriented toward solstices, equinoxes, or the path of the moon. Could these silent earthworks have functioned as calendars, guiding seasonal rituals, agricultural cycles, or spiritual ceremonies? Or is this alignment coincidental, a product of topography, rather than intention? The truth remains tantalizingly elusive, hidden within the soil and imagination alike. Local accounts and early historical records add another layer of fascination. Settlers in the 19th century described the mounds as mysterious, with some speculating they were remnants of a lost civilization predating known Native American cultures. Skeletal remains uncovered within a few mounds occasionally suggested unusual traits, prompting speculation that the people buried here may have been distinct in stature, appearance, or ritual practice. While modern archaeology often interprets these reports cautiously, sometimes attributing anomalies to natural variation or measurement error, they continue to fuel curiosity and debate. The mounds themselves evoke a sense of quiet grandeur. Standing atop one, the surrounding farmland stretches to the horizon, interspersed with forests and rivers, a landscape largely unchanged for hundreds of years. It is easy to imagine ceremonies conducted in the soft light of dawn, gatherings marked by music, chants, or offerings, the participants moving in patterns that echoed the very circles they had constructed. Were these circles intended to mirror the cycles of the heavens, to ground their community in both land and sky? Or were they memorials, honoring the dead while asserting territorial or spiritual claims? Speculative theories, though unproven, persist in local and historical narratives. Some suggest that the Anderson Mounds are evidence of an unknown or hybrid culture, blending Hopewell practices with influences from more distant regions. Others propose that the circular arrangements encode symbolic messages, a form of communication lost over time, whose meaning could range from spiritual cosmology to social hierarchy. Even if such ideas cannot be substantiated, they underscore the depth of mystery and human fascination that surrounds these mounds. Artifacts recovered from the Anderson Mounds provide tantalizing hints, yet rarely answers. Pottery, often decorated with intricate geometric designs, may have served ceremonial or domestic purposes, but the designs themselves hint at abstract concepts or storytelling that remain opaque to modern interpretation. Stone tools, some polished to a fine edge, suggest skilled craftsmanship and daily activity, but when found within certain mounds, they seem almost ceremonial, as if placed with intention and reverence. The combination of utility and symbolism reflects a people deeply attuned to their surroundings, their society organized both materially and spiritually. The silence of the mounds today is profound. No longer the stage for the rituals they once hosted, they now rise quietly amidst the rhythm of modern life. The wind moves through the tall grasses, the soil bears the imprint of countless seasons, and the circles endure as reminders of human ingenuity, devotion, and mystery. Yet even in this quiet, questions abound. What messages were embedded in the placement, size, and orientation of these mounds? How much cultural knowledge was encoded in these silent forms, and how much has already been lost to the passage of time? Each mound invites reflection, not just on the lives of those who built them, but on the broader human urge to shape, mark, and understand the world. They are monuments of memory, of ritual, and of identity. They challenge us to consider the possibilities of a society capable of complex planning and celestial awareness, one that left behind physical traces that endure, even as their stories remain partially hidden. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the circular terraces, it is difficult not to feel a sense of reverence. These mounds, quiet and resolute, connect us to an ancient past, to people who walked the same land but whose knowledge, beliefs, and intentions remain partially obscured. Are the Anderson Mounds mere burial sites, ceremonial grounds, or part of something far larger? A cultural system whose full significance we have yet to comprehend? Standing among the earthworks, one realizes that their power lies not just in what they reveal, but in what they conceal. They remind us that history is layered, complex, and sometimes deliberately opaque. The Anderson Mounds endure as circles of earth and sky, inviting us to look, to wonder, and to acknowledge that Indiana's past, like the mounds themselves, is vast, intricate, and far from fully understood. As the Ohio River winds gently through the verdant landscape of southwestern Indiana, it carries with it the quiet echoes of a civilization long vanished from the pages of recorded history. On a broad floodplain near present-day Evansville, the land rises subtly, forming terraces and embankments that hint at human design. These rises, meticulously arranged and clearly constructed, form the heart of what archaeologists now call angel mounds, one of the largest and most sophisticated prehistoric sites in North America. At first glance, it might seem like ordinary hills and depressions, but closer inspection reveals a sprawling network of platforms, ceremonial spaces, and dwellings, hinting at a community once vibrant and complex, now silent beneath the grass and soil. Angel Mounds was inhabited by the Mississippian culture between approximately 1000 and 1450 CE, a society renowned for its elaborate earthworks, hierarchical social organization, and far-reaching trade networks. Yet despite centuries of research, many questions remain. How was this city conceived and constructed with the resources and technology available at the time? How did its inhabitants organize labor, sustain agriculture, and maintain such a large population along the river's banks? And perhaps most intriguingly, what prompted the sudden abandonment of the site, leaving behind terraces, mounds, and artifacts as mute witnesses to lives once fully lived? The site itself is both majestic and enigmatic. Large platform mounds dominate the landscape, their flat tops suggesting they once supported ceremonial structures or elite dwellings. Surrounding these central mounds are numerous smaller mounds and depressions, interpreted as residential spaces, plazas, or burial sites. The sheer scale and organization of the city imply careful planning, a society with a sophisticated understanding of both space and hierarchy. Yet while excavations have revealed pottery, stone tools, ornaments, and remnants of wooden structures, much remains hidden beneath the earth. What stories do these mounds hold about the people who built them? And why does so much of their daily life remain a mystery? Historical accounts from early European settlers mention the mounds with awe and curiosity. They described a landscape punctuated by raised earthworks, some of which they claimed were aligned with the river, the stars, or both. Local legends spoke of a vanished people, of communities that thrived along the Ohio's fertile banks and then disappeared, leaving behind only their monumental constructions. Modern archaeology confirms these accounts in part, but the motives, rituals, and social structures of the Mississippians remain only partially understood. One of the most fascinating aspects of Angel Mounds is its apparent celestial awareness. Certain terraces and mound alignments suggest that the inhabitants may have observed the sun, moon, and stars, incorporating these cycles into ceremonial or agricultural practices. Were these structures designed purely for ritual purposes, or did they also serve as functional guides for planting, harvesting, and seasonal planning? The evidence is tantalizing but incomplete, leaving ample room for speculation while firmly anchored in the observable features of the site. Artifacts recovered from Angel Mounds provide glimpses of a vibrant culture. Intricately decorated pottery, stone pipes, and tools indicate not only daily utility but also artistry, social expression, and spiritual significance. Items crafted from exotic materials, copper, mica, shells, suggest trade networks extending hundreds of miles, connecting the Mississippians to distant communities and resources. Yet these tangible traces of connection and creativity raise further questions. What beliefs, stories, or knowledge traveled with these objects? How did they influence the lives of those who inhabited the mounds, and what was lost when the city was abandoned? Speculative theories occasionally emerge around the site, though they remain outside mainstream archaeology. Some suggest that Angel Mounds was part of a broader ceremonial or political network spanning the Ohio River Valley and beyond, serving as a hub for regional governance or spiritual authority. Others point to oral histories and symbolic interpretations of the Mounds layout, imagining that the city encoded complex cosmologies, spiritual hierarchies, or even astronomical knowledge. While these ideas cannot be verified definitively, they illustrate the enduring fascination these structures hold, a fascination born of the gaps between what we know and what remains hidden. Walking among the Mounds today, one is struck by their quiet majesty. The terraces rise gently from the landscape, overgrown with grasses and shaded by scattered trees, yet the precision of their construction is undeniable. Paths once trodden by the city's inhabitants have long since disappeared, leaving only the contours of earth and the occasional fragment of pottery to mark human presence. It is a place where the past seems tangible, yet elusive, a reminder that history is layered and much of it lies just out of reach. The abandonment of Angel Mounds adds another layer of mystery. Archaeologists debate whether environmental changes, social upheaval, resource depletion, or disease contributed to the city's decline. Yet the absence of written records, combined with the intentional placement and preservation of mounds, leaves space for wonder. How did such a sophisticated urban center vanish from memory, leaving behind monumental earthworks and a scattering of artifacts as the only testimony of a once thriving society? As the Ohio River glides past, reflecting the shifting light of dawn or dusk, Angel Mounds stands as a testament to human ambition, ingenuity, and resilience. It invites reflection on the lives of those who walked its terraces, built its platforms, and shaped a city aligned with both earth and sky. What knowledge, stories, or wisdom were encoded in the layout of these mounds? What remains buried beneath the soil, waiting to be discovered? And what does the silent endurance of this lost city tell us about the passage of time, the fragility of civilizations, and the mysteries that remain beyond our understanding? In the presence of Angel Mounds, one cannot help but pause to consider both the accomplishments of the Mississippian builders and the questions that still linger. The city is gone, yet not forgotten. It challenges us to look deeper, to listen carefully to the stories etched in earth and sky, and to wonder at the civilizations that once thrived, left their mark and then vanished, quietly, mysteriously, and forever leaving the questions open for those who follow.